myself as one of the happiest people I know for a variety of reasons, but one of them is that we actually have two companies. One is a consulting company called Charette, where we focus on macro trends and understanding what we typically think of as wicked problems that are affecting our lives and how to solve them. And then we've got a startup that's called eParachute that's focused on, as Josh outed me, the work of my father from What Color Is Your Parachute, but bringing that online and focusing on helping people to find meaningful work with a wide variety of different populations. So what I want to help calibrate, I guess, is that as you're attending this event and you're hearing about all these incredible changes and technological impact and disruption, it turns out that there are many, many things that are unique about this age, and there are many, many things that are not. And so I want to help you to both see what I see in terms of the dynamics of what is changing, but then also some of the immutables that are not. And so what's true pretty much in any era is that it's almost always the best of times and the worst of times. And when we think about work, it's the best of times if what you'd like to do is you think of yourself as being very entrepreneurial, and you think of yourself as engaging around projects, and you are able to find meaningful opportunities to be able to use your tremendous skill set. We're in an era where the friction, the access to doing fascinating things has been reduced. But it's also a challenging time because, as Josh was talking about, there's a lot of negative effects of the changes that technology and globalization, which kind of work together, have impacted the way that we work and have changed the calculus for many people in ways that have been to many a jarring process. So I'm just going to roll through these. All these slides are going to be on SlideShare later today. So I want to I'll at the end I'll tell you sort of three major takeaways that I want you to have. But what's important to understand is that the intersection of technology and the world of work, there are these new platforms that have appeared that have made that process of getting access to work much, much easier. And so as Josh was saying, if you're unemployed, if you need supplementary work, there's all sorts of ways now to be able to supplement your income that didn't exist before. And so those platforms have given a tremendous opportunity for people to get access to work, but they don't always mean, it's not a guarantee that you're going to have the full portfolio of work, as I call it, that you need to be able to have a reasonable income. And so I want to talk about some of those dynamics and how you can factor for those. The advent of technology creates what I think of as the new arms race. There's a lot of discussion about whether or not the advance of robots and AI are basically going to evaporate work. And Josh is maintaining that it won't. I think that actually we'll have a healthy discussion about the places where it most impacts the opportunity to be able to find meaningful work, and where robots and software are sort of optimized for how they can have the ways that they're going to change the way that we work. So I just did a lecture series at the request of the government in New Zealand a couple weeks ago, and the typical question I get asked is, all these changes in the world of work and in learning and so on, well, how do we actually work to thrive? What are the ways that we can try to be able to adapt to these ongoing changes? And one of the reasons I think that it's such a pivotal time is that actually we've seen this kind of transition before. When we transitioned from a largely agricultural economy and society throughout the world to a largely industrial society, it was as big a set of changes as we're experiencing now. We don't have a name for this. We can call it the digital age, but it's happening in a blindingly fast period of time. And as a matter of fact, there's a number of institutions that were laid down during that transition. We don't even get told when we first start out in this world the boxes that we live within. And so actually there's a book called The 3 Boxes of Life, which my father wrote back in 1986, that essentially broke this construct down. But this is a construct that was laid down as we transitioned to an industrial society. And so what happened was that we needed this big chunk of education because we were going to go work in factories. And it all had to happen at the front end. And then you had that job. And then at the end, in what I call the period formerly known as retirement, you had this big chunk of leisure. And so that model is being ripped apart by the combination of technology and globalization. And so if you think of the way that we calibrated our existing higher education system, so you were supposed to learn a field or a skill, quote unquote, and then you were going to have this long career, And then you're going to have this period, hopefully, of relaxation at the, when you're kind of too used up to do anything else. And as Josh was saying, so that model of a career is changing because people are, as this Bureau of Labor Statistics report says, they're changing jobs basically average 12 times just between the ages of 18 and 48. So what you need to think about is not this idea of a career, which was a choice you made a long time ago and you're passing through. Instead, it's going to be the aggregation of all the different things you did in your relationship with the world of work until you stop having a relationship with the world of work. And so it's important to think about, well, what's the new skill set that's required for this? One of it's going to be adapting to change. It's going to be, how do you go through this transition again and again, not reactively, that is getting fired from a job or losing a job or being disintermediated by technology, and then figuring out what you do next, but being ahead of that curve. So I want to talk a little bit about how to be ahead of that curve. So I think we're entering in an era where we're all going to have what I call a portfolio of work. That is, it's a range of different things you do in your relationship with work, from the things that you do for free, things that you do to learn, things that you do to be able to interact with people that you like to be around, to the things that you're compensated for, and everything in between. But to be able to understand how that works, let's deconstruct work. So work really has just three components. There are problems, you have the tasks that are used to solve those problems, and you have skills that you use to perform those tasks. So this is a job. This is what we think of as a job. It's the combination of these things. And the problems are the problems that typically a payer has. We've called that payer the employer or the customer, but it's somebody who's got money or some resource that you want, and you want to perform these tasks with skills that you have. So what's most important in this calculus is, well, what are your skills? What are you good at? What do you love doing? What are the kinds of tasks that you like to perform? So let's break those down. It turns out that there's research going back to the 1950s that breaks skills into two categories. It's what you know and what you do. So what you know is typically called special knowledges, or it's the bodies of information that are rooted in a particular area. So knowing brain surgery is probably not going to help you to fix the carburetor on your car if you have a car with a carburetor. So that's a rooted body of knowledge. But then what you do, there's all these different skills that are usable in a variety of different areas. So it turns out that in this era, what you know, all the different things that you could have a body of knowledge about, is growing. It's expanding rapidly because we're starting to unbundle those things. This is just one list of one university's different types of degrees that you can get. But each one of these has a whole bunch of different subcategories and subfields and some areas that all have a body of knowledge. So we are constantly learning and changing as we grow as human beings, and we're gathering this information that aggregates together. That's a set of skills. And you can know, you have a unique set of those knowledges, and you're constantly enhancing them as time goes on. It's the same thing with transferable skills. This is a list of 264 transferable skills. They all are gerunds. They all end in ing. So it's things like coordinating, it's things like guiding, it's things like working with people, and so on. So this combination of what you know and what you can do, these transferable skills, it turns out, are increasingly important in this constantly changing world of work, because we used to over-index on knowledges. That's why you had to go to college. That's why you had to get a degree. You had to be prepared for this field because you were going to be in a career for a long period of time. If you're going to be in a variety of different work situations, we're starting to see the need to be able to over-index on those transferable skills. That is, to be able to practice those skills that allow you to work in a variety of different arenas. So with Parachute, what we do is we break the different characteristics of you down into 7 groupings. There's skills, and then there's knowledges, but then it's also things like the people that you work around, the kinds of compensation that you get, your salary, the workplace, the working conditions that you're in, and so on. And so each of these are characteristics of you. That is, you have preferences, you have capabilities, you have interests, you have particular abilities that are you enjoy using and that you're better at than others. And all of those aggregated together also define the kind of work that you do. And so one of the skills I was talking about to adapt to this brave new world of constant change is self-inventory. It's, do you know the answer to the question, what are your favorite characteristics in each one of these? We call this the flower, each one of these petals of the flower. It's crucial to be able to do that self-inventory, because your ability to be proactive and to choose the next thing that you want to do or how to build out your portfolio of work is going to increasingly come from that self-knowledge. So the advent of technology and globalization, though, changed the calculus a little bit about which are going to be valued, which of your skills and knowledges are going to be valued in the future world of work. And so if we break it down just into, on the y-axis, the tasks that you're asked to solve, to perform, to solve particular problems, and those transferable skills that I talked about. And you think about it from the range of, if you're just doing tasks that are repetitive, you're doing them over and over again, versus they're very, very unique. They're one-offs. You have to keep on figuring out new ways to do new tasks to solve new problems. And then on the x-axis, if you sort of balance it out between things that you can analyze, like you could break it down and be able to do it again and again, versus ones that require intuition, more human types of understanding to be able to solve a particular problem and perform particular tasks, it's pretty clear that down in the bottom left corner, the types of tasks that you're performing where you do them over and over again and they're reasonably easy to break down, that's the province of robots and AI. So if you read the book, The Second Machine Age, for instance, this is basically their thesis, is that that bottom left quadrant is where automation, the combination of automation and globalization, which work together, are continually breaking down work and being performed by robots and software. It's that upper right quadrant of unique tasks and intuitive processes to be able to solve those particular problems where humans are going to continue to have the most opportunity. And so this is another way of looking at it. I mentioned that research going back to the 50s. This is by a great guy by the name of Sidney Fine, who's no longer with us. But he broke transferable skills down to 3 categories: ones that work with information, ones that work with people, and ones with things. And again, if the bottom is the repetitive sort of stuff and the top is the real, more analytical stuff, technology is going to take the bottom of it. And it's the combination of technology and globalization which work hand in hand, just like work and learning do. You can't separate them out, because as we increasingly have platforms that distribute work, if the technology breaks the work down into different tasks, but then globalization allows you to be able to have people all over the world focusing on those tasks. So again, the calculus used to be much more on what you know, and as we continue along, we're going to find that there's opportunities to be able to leverage technology to make it faster and faster to gather that information that's going to transform the educational arena. And the example that I use is auto mechanics. My nephew was trained as an auto mechanic, went to school for it, and now you're going to be able to use applications. You're going to wear something like a Google Glass or other augmented reality. You're going to look at the engine. It's going to tell you where the carburetor is and how to take it apart. So why did you need to go to college for that? What was the value of that? It's the transferable skills again that are going to be most important. So what's happening is those boxes that were traditionally the sequence of your life are becoming unbundled. And the mentality that we all have to have is that all of these are lifelong processes. You didn't just go to school and stop learning. It's not possible. It's not possible in this brave new world of unbundled work. And so your relationship with education has to last just as long as your relationship with work does, because you're going to need to constantly be proactive. And the part, unfortunately, of our lives that we leave as the leftover is leisure, is the things that we do for fun. And so it's really, really important to be proactive about having lifelong components of each of these. And you'll find yourself increasingly breaking down the things you need to learn next into what's often called nano learning. So Josh was talking about AT&T. They've got a relationship with Udacity, online training platform, where AT&T has said, here are 3 jobs we cannot hire enough people for. Udacity stood up a course that can be learned in 3 weeks and guaranteed that everybody, 3 months, that everybody who finishes this course has a job at the end of it. And if you don't get a job, you get your money back. So we're going to continually compress the learning for a variety of different areas. Not every area. I don't want my brain surgeon to have done it by mail order, but I do want certain jobs to basically be broken down and into their different components, and make it easier to be able to learn the pieces that you just need to learn, you need to learn to be effective at that work. So this is an example. There's a school in New York called Flatiron. They can teach coders to be able to do pretty high-end work in about 3.5 months. And it's comparable learning for very, very specific types of projects to the point, to a full-on degree, to the point where they have a 97% placement rate. This is the future. However, one of the challenges of this future is the balance of the incentives between payers and workers. And this is going to be a healthy discussion with Josh and with Rob about, well, wait a minute. So the business, it has a whole bunch of incentives about trying to leverage work to bring people in to do different kinds of work, typically at the lowest possible pay. I mean, that's, at the end of the day, if all that a business is about is creating shareholder value, that is, that the business, its whole reason for being is just to benefit shareholders, the inevitable conclusion at the end of that syllogismic chain is that you need to get work for the cheapest possible amount. And so that doesn't mean that every business needs to do that. There are ways to change that calculus. But as industries become unbundled, and I want to explain what that means, the result is that there's huge pressure to be able to try to get the best possible work done for the cheapest amount. And so that's one of the challenges of technology and globalization, is it actually makes it a lot easier to do that kind of thing. So let me explain what unbundling is. John Hagel, an old friend, also works at Deloitte, and did a marvelous talk yesterday. He came up with this idea of unbundling going back almost 20 years ago. And when he talked about, and I've applied it to a variety of different industries. If you think about value in the past, market dominance was created essentially by bundling together a bunch of things. And I've written a series of pieces on medium.com. You can find this one quite easily, but this is unbundling media. And so I used to run magazines in the 1990s, 6 different magazines. And what's a media business? But basically it's these different pieces. It's the ability to produce something, it's content creation, it's content curation, distributing, and then advertising. So technology and globalization came along and blew the media business to bits. And what did it end up looking like? Each of those layers got broken apart because technology allowed you to split them up. And so who took each of these different layers? Google, obviously, and Facebook on mobile took the advertising portion. Huffington Post is a perfect example of an open sort of curation platform, and so on. So this is what technology and globalization do, is they continually unbundle industries. And this is true of, it looks like some of the fonts blew up. Music, newspapers, magazines, and books and videos, that's already happened. Under process, transportation. So industries that previously had market power because the incumbents had bundled together all of these different components. And I won't bore you with walking through each one of these, but they all follow exactly the same dynamic. Some are harder to unbundle than others, and so healthcare and financial services are actually ones that where only a lot of the innovation is happening at the edge, not yet at the core. So what is the result of exponentials impacting these industries? Is that the middle evaporates. This is really, really important as you think about your own work, your own career, and as you look at the dynamics of people who work in a particular field. So I tend to think of industries as pyramids. So with the large multinational dominant at the top, and the small, nimble, and locally or niche focused at the bottom, and everything in between. So before the advent of technology and globalization, this is what a lot of industries look like. Now, every industry goes through periods of expansion and consolidation, but basically, just like healthy ecosystems have niche players at each level, healthy business ecosystems had players at each level. But along comes technology and globalization. What happens is that the friction to entry is reduced. So you get a lot more small and niched players at the bottom. This is why we have so many accelerators and incubators and so much entrepreneurial activity, is because it's the friction at the bottom has been significantly reduced. But what ends up happening is, in industry after industry, power accretes at the top. There's only one Google, one Facebook, one Amazon.com, and so on. You can just run the litany down, and it's because increasing returns tend to build that market power at the top. And because many of these now are paranoid organizations, I always say Andy Grove trumps Clay Christensen. Only the paranoid survive is trumping the innovator's dilemma, is that the incumbents are actually increasingly able to lock in their market power because they're watching for anybody to cross that middle. and they're either acquiring them or they're putting them out of business. And so it creates what I call fat bottom world. Tons and tons of innovation at the bottom. It's always easy to start a new business. It's easy to start a new blog. Very, very difficult to scale to the middle. And why is that? I use the analogy of sea turtles. So what does the mother sea turtle do? She crawls up on the beach, lays 10,000 eggs. They crawl down the beach, birds and sun and so on, and only a small percentage make it to the water, and then in the water there are fish and so on. So this is exactly what the dynamics happen right now, and especially because of venture capital, what I call impatient capital, is encouraging the process of lots and lots of innovation at the base, but then very, very few sea turtles making it to maturity. And the IPO market in the United States is gone, so that used to be what we'd call a mid-sized company. And it's because the Googles and the Facebooks and so on are acquiring them once they reach the water. So this is the dynamic that we have. It creates huge opportunity, but it's also very difficult to scale businesses in this. And so labor the dynamics of the evaporating middle class, which also has some of the same dynamics, but basically this is also an impact on our job market. So I don't mean to basically just make everybody wish they would go out and slash their wrist because it's all this opportunity is evaporated. It's actually created more opportunity. It's pushing the responsibility onto the individual. So if your work is these 7 different characteristics that I was talking about, the job mirrors those. So these are the 7 things that are true about you and the 7 things that are true about a job. When you look for a job and you get one, it's a one-to-one correspondence. With a portfolio of work, which is increasingly what people are going to have, and especially, Josh was talking about Uber, what it does is it changes the calculus, and because the tasks are defined by the platform, there's actually less opportunity. It's useful only for certain use cases. There's plenty of other ways that you can actually, as an individual, build in this sort of portfolio of work and be able to have lots of different activities going, different projects, but it's important to be very, very proactive about it. Another way to think about this is you, all the things that are true about you, this is the work. The more you can match, the more you make those 2 circles overlap, the more rewarding the work is for you. This is also true at the macro level, so I'm going to just blast through this because I'm almost at the end of my time. So there's always, in every era, capability and demand. So this is the workforce, this is all the work out there. An oversimplification says there's always people that are sort of left behind. There's always new work opportunity for people who haven't been trained. This is a recession where there's lots of people who have been left behind and there's a whole bunch of new need. And this is the worry about robots and software, is that circle shrinks. And so what we need instead to do is to figure out, well, how do we keep that circle growing of future needs so there's plenty of work? And entrepreneurism is certainly one of the answers. So the other thing that we're not capturing here, which is actually another healthy discussion with Josh, is underemployment. Is one of the challenges is that you absolutely get the dynamic where people are potentially doing things that do not use their best and most motivated skills. So I have 3 recommendations. The first is, at the top, we need to change policies for this unbundled world of work. There's all sorts of things baked into our institutions that reward the old model, the 3 boxes model. It's gone. So we need to do all these things that accept that learning needs to become unbundled, work is becoming unbundled, and be able to figure out ways that people can dynamically bind around problems, learn what they need to do to be able to be good at solving those problems, and move on to the next thing. And so that's everything from portable benefits, as Josh was talking about, to things like making it easier to start a business. We can buy a house, we can buy a car, but starting a business, especially in this country, is horrendously challenging. Second is the purpose of the organization needs to focus on purpose, is that if it's just shareholders, it's a fail. We need to expand the constituents that organizations care about, and that has to include employees, customers, and so on. We'll change the calculus for work. And then third is we have to change the way our educational systems are designed from scratch. If I told you you had to design a system guaranteed to help someone from cradle to adapt to lifelong learning, you'd have to change the entire way we think about how to teach people for tomorrow. You wouldn't have this big box of education only at the front end. You'd have to break all these pieces up. So, and this is the way we tend to think about it, is if on the left-hand side it's it's the same thing, it's the task that you're doing, how good you are at it, and the right-hand, and the x-axis, it's what you enjoy. The top right quadrant, doing what you enjoy and what you're great at, is what you need to continually bind around. So as I was saying at the beginning, it's the best of times and it's the worst of times. But this is from Charles Dickens. This is back in 1857. This is from Tale of Two Cities. What most people don't do is they don't read the whole thing. So this is how I want to wrap up, is it's always the season of light. It's always the season of darkness. We always have everything in front of us and we always have nothing in front of us. But in every single period, people often say, this is unique. It's the only way, it's the only time that these particular dynamics exist. And that's true, but for you as an individual, what's immutable, what will always be true, is these characteristics about you and what you can do and the way you can provide value in the world. And so for each of us, the opportunity is to continually understand what we're good at and where the things that we can solve, the problems that we can bind around, and to not have it be this way where only a small amount of what we can do is overlapping with what we are doing, but instead we can make those match up. We can be doing the things, we can calibrate ourselves, we can be adaptive to calibrate around the work that we think we can do the best, to contribute the best, and we can each thrive. Thank you.